On this edition of Southern Newsweek, a scandal at the University of Otago's medical school is larger than first thought. Timaru residents were treated to a very unusual weather event. An English band Coldplay chose the ODT out of all the world's media to showcase lyrics from their new LP. Kia ora, good evening, I'm Melissa Barton. Over 50 University of Otago medical students have had their qualifications withheld after the tertiary institution found an overseas placement route is much wider than first believed. The university says it identified the problem with a handful of students. However, the faculty believe it's a much bigger problem than first thought.
The careers of more than 50 Otago University medical students hang in the balance following an overseas placement scandal.
Those are the numbers that have actually fronted up. I think, yes, I am surprised. What more can I say?
Dean of the Otago Medical School, Professor Barry Taylor, says the medical school is extremely disappointed by the extent of the issue. On the basis of the information gathered, 53 students, or about 20%, have had their qualifications withheld.
I think there is a broad cultural issue here of entitlement. I think our society has groups of people who feel very self-entitled. If you're earning $2 or $3 million a year, you feel pretty self-entitled. If you're senior medical staff, you're often feeling quite self-entitled.
The University of Otago says the failure to complete an elective does not mean that a person lacks the skills to function fully as a first-year doctor. Professor Barry Taylor says it is not something that happened in his day.
I think that if you go back long enough, go back 30 years and you can talk to people who did electives. I did an elective myself more than 30 years ago. I did mine in New Zealand and I didn't take any time off. I worked very hard. But there has been I think an evolving culture, an international evolving culture of people taking more and more time. So I think it's evolved over time and then probably fairly rapidly escalated.
The university is working with the Medical Council to identify a restorative pathway which may allow students involved to begin contributing to the health system without delay. In Dunedin, the South Today.
The town of Timaru and surrounding area encountered heavy hail on Wednesday afternoon. Hailstones bigger than golf balls brought the town to a standstill and caused at least one vehicle crash on the highway.
Thunderstorms were experienced across North Otago yesterday, but it was Timaru that bore the brunt of the extreme weather. The deluge saw hailstones the size of golf balls and larger pelting the town. NIWA meteorologist Ben Knoll says cold air in the upper atmosphere and rapid heating of the ground by sunlight provided the right environment for hail. The combination of the two different air temperatures can cause rising motion or wind in the atmosphere. And he says the Canterbury Plains are the meeting point for winds from the interior of the country and coastal winds, which created instability and caused the hailstones which rained down yesterday. During the storm, a Toyota Hiace van skidded off the road and into a ditch. Police say the accident had left the vehicle's occupants shaken. In Timaru, the South Today.
Readers of Tuesday's Otago Daily Times might have been intrigued by pop song lyrics printed in advertising space throughout the paper. It turns out New Zealand's only independent newspaper had been chosen from all of the world's media outlets to reveal lyrics to the new album by British pop band Coldplay.
The Otago Daily Times for 19th of November featured 15 cryptic advertisements showcasing deep and moody pop song lyrics. Readers need no longer be puzzled after it was revealed on Twitter to over 23 million fans of the band Coldplay that these are the words to songs on their new album set to be released on Friday. The newspaper's national advertising sales manager Nick Dowell says he got a phone call saying the ODT was the only media outlet in the whole world chosen to publish the lyrics.
I got a call from Bullseye Media, which is Warner Music's advertising agency, and they said Coldplay have chosen the Otago Daily Times to produce all the lyrics from the next upcoming album, which is out on Friday. So I was like, far out, that's fantastic.
And Dowell says it's quite a scoop for the paper.
It is exceptional that he has chosen the Otago Daily Times. I understand they actually did look at other papers but chose the ODT.
It should not be that surprising that Dunedin was chosen, as Coldplay's lead singer Chris Martin spent several weeks here accompanying then partner Gwyneth Paltrow during the filming of the movie Sylvia in 2003. While staying at Dunedin's Corstorphine House, Martin needed to hire a good quality piano for a surprise birthday party for Paltrow at the Dunedin bar Pekino.
And he introduced himself. He's a very nice guy, and while he was looking over the guitars that we had hanging on the hook, and he took a liking to one of them, which was a Takamine, I believe, which was one of our main agencies at that time. And he said, I think I'll buy this, and so he bought it straight up. So I think it was a couple of $1,000s at the time.
Dixon says Chris Martin's choice of Dunedin to reveal the lyrics for his new album is not surprising.
And he had a really good time there, and really enjoyed the piano he played. And so I guess that was all part of the deal. He just loved it here in Dunedin.
The guitar he bought, seen here modelled by Dunedin man Rob West, was autographed by both Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow and donated for a charity auction to raise funds for Dunedin's Art Centre, a shared art studio for people within the mental health community. In Dunedin, the South Today.
The White Ribbon Riders are touring the country educating young boys and men on how to address the issue of men's violence towards women. Their trek took them to Alexandra on Monday, where they shared their message to a receptive audience at the local primary school.
Tough-looking motorcycle riders roaring into Alexandra Primary School on Monday. The annual White Ribbon Ride, organised by the White Ribbon Trust, treks across the country every year to educate young and old on the issue of family harm and men's violence towards women.
There's quite a few different things. We're talking about boys don't cry, and you know, it's okay to cry. If something is hurting you big time and you need to express your emotions, you're allowed to cry.
Mackenzie is grateful for the pupils sharing and listening to the Trust's message to open up.
If you feel like you are sinking, change your thought process from negative to positive.
We get told to toughen up, get hard. We want to change that to open up. Rather than toughening up, open up.
Travelling through the country every November to share a message of peace and hope takes the riders through a dizzying list of towns, which can be a challenge for anyone to remember.
We've made our way from Haast down through Alex and to here. And this evening we're in Gore. And tomorrow we're in Invercargill, and then all the way back to... I'm not sure.
Upon reflection, Mackenzie later recalled he and his White Ribbon Riders were planning to reach Blenheim by next Monday. In Alexandra, the South Today.
You need to have people in your life that you can trust.
Still to come in the Southern News Week, the DCC's plans to close the Octagon to traffic is ruffling retailers' feathers. And Oamaru celebrates its Victorian heritage, so see you after the break. Welcome back. The Dunedin City Council is planning trial closures of the Octagon, including full closures early next year. Business owners say they'll have to shut up shop for good if a proposed closure of the Octagon goes ahead.
A $15,000 trial closure of Dunedin's Octagon means cruise ship buses won't be able to park in the Octagon and will instead head to Toitu or nearby streets, which has irritated some business owners, including I Love Merino's Colin Lim.
The issue first came up when the two ladies that are running the show came in with a couple of pieces of paper to tell us what was happening, and then we've heard nothing back from them since then. I've tried to ring the people who are running it, and yesterday I had to leave a message for them to call me back. I haven't heard back from them.
Lim says the closures will mean a reduction in staff levels, and he's already told staff some won't be coming back after Christmas if this goes ahead, as his business mostly relies on tourism.
Most of our business is off cruise ship passengers, and most of those passengers have to be let off in the Octagon, otherwise we won't see them.
Dunedin City Council Infrastructure Services General Manager Simon Drew says staff approached more than 75 businesses in and around the Octagon last week, informing them of the trial closure. And while some businesses were unhappy about it, many agreed to support it in principle. But not all on council agree closing the Octagon is a good idea.
And unfortunately for me, that closure is a little bit too severe. There's a lot of other options on the table that council hasn't proceeded, or as I can see it, haven't identified them. For example, saying that the buses are going to go through to Toitu, 45,000 cruise ship passengers potentially hopping off the buses at Toitu, heading into the Octagon, to me is just a no-go. We've got a lot of other options around Moray Place and more around the Centre City Hub. We need to maintain those options.
Another Octagon business owner says she's spoken to 18 business owners around the Octagon who are all concerned about the significant impact of the closure on their businesses. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Lindsay Creek, which runs through the heart of Dunedin's Northeast Valley, brought its community together last weekend at Creek Fest. The festival is intended to celebrate the stream and educate people about what lives in the waterway.
Otago Fish and Game Council Field Officer Steve Dixon demonstrating the art of electric fishing in Dunedin's Lindsay's Creek, which flows through Northeast Valley. The electric fishing technique temporarily stuns aquatic life, enabling him to study the health of the waterway.
What we use that machine for is to put an electrical current into streams, small streams like this, and we want to see what fish life is in there. So the electrical current from the machine actually stuns the fish. We can pick them up in a small net, put them in a bucket where we can identify them, photograph them, weigh them, and then put them back in the creek again.
Dixon's electric fishing demonstration was just one of the many fun and interesting events at this year's Creek Fest held at Chingford Park. Valley Project Manager Tess Trotter says the festival is for everyone in the community to enjoy a day out and learn a bit more about their suburban stream.
Mostly to honour and celebrate the Awa, the Lindsay River that flows through Chingford Park and right down the valley to meet the waters of the Leaf. So lots of people doing education activities, telling people about what the creatures they can find in the creeks, doing a bit of weeding of some of the riparian planting area, and then just music and fun, basically.
Dixon says despite the river's urban environment, it's in a very good state and possesses an abundance of aquatic life.
Lindsay's Creek seems to be really, really healthy. I mean, I only electric fish probably about 10 metres square, and we've got about 10 fish, so the creek is looking really, really healthy. We've got yabbies and trout, so if the stream wasn't healthy, you wouldn't have those.
Creek Fest is now in its 4th year, and organisers described last weekend's event as the biggest yet. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Oamaru's annual Victorian Heritage celebrations were in full swing last weekend. Wheels was the theme for this year's celebration of how things were during the reign of Queen Victoria.
Wheels that go round and round. North Otago artist Matt King tries out his Victorian-style velocipede sculpture, crafted out of scrap metal, with plans to ride it in Saturday's Victorian Heritage celebrations in Oamaru. This year's theme was wheels, and they showed up in all forms with vintage and veteran cars in the annual Victorian Street Parade on Saturday. Starting at the town's Victorian precinct and finishing in Lower Thames Street, organisers say the parade is now in its 30th year and features all manner of Victoriana to appeal to both young and old. Saturday afternoon's Victorian Fete saw volunteers from the Oamaru Steam and Rail organisation run their B10 vintage steam train from Harbourside Station. And the famous Oamaru stone, used for dressing buildings and houses around the country, got the chop at the Stone Sawing Championships, with women's doubles seen here. One of the most popular events was Friday afternoon's Victorian Garden Party, next to the band rotunda at Oamaru Public Gardens, where people could play croquet or enjoy a spot of tea, regardless of whether they were in period costume. Also held on Friday, and exclusively for those who took the effort to dress up in clothes styled from Victorian days, was the grand photo opportunity on the steps of the Oamaru Opera House. Now in its 11th consecutive year, members of the public were invited to turn up in clothes modelled on those worn during Queen Victoria's reign between 1837 and 1901. In Oamaru, the South Today.
Dunedin motorists driving along Portobello Road have been rewarded for their patience. Staff working the stop-go lights had a stash of thousands of lollipops to hand out to motorists while they waited.
Do you fancy a lollipop? Yeah, three. Oh, there's one in the back.
Fulton Hogan's stop-go operators handing out lollipops to motorists held up by traffic lights as the road works to widen the coast road from Dunedin to Portobello continue. Senior Project Manager Brett Patterson says the little sweet treats are a gesture of appreciation to the motorists for their patience.
So we understand that as we do our work we affect the traffic coming through and we cause a few delays and hold people up in their daily business. So just one of the wee things we do as a thank you to the community is hand out a few lollipops to the people as they go past. So yeah, it's just a little thank you from us, just to say we understand that we interrupt your day and sorry about that, but have a lollipop.
You can either go green or red, choice is up to you.
10,000 lollipops have been ordered by Fulton Hogan to give drivers their sugar fix, and Patterson says the regular road users have been very understanding of the delays while their road gets widened.
So there's been a lot of positive feedback. We get a lot of smiles and thank yous, and occasionally we get some muffins dropped off to us and things like that as well, which is really cool. So no, the feedback from the community is very, very good, very positive.
The Dunedin City Council's Peninsula Connection Safety Improvement Project will see roadworks on this section continue until mid next year. In Dunedin, the South Today.
After the break on Southern Newsweek, a collaboration between a Dunedin artist and New Zealand's Poet Laureate results in a huge work of art. And a group of oily penguins have a happy ending in Oamaru, so stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Over the years, there have been many collaborations between poets and painters. One of the most notable examples being Colin McCann and Charles Brash. And now two well-known southern artists have shown that bigger can be better.
A massive artwork by Port Chalmers artist James Robinson will soon be available for all to see in his home studio.
Yeah, this is sort of a more intimate at-home show, but it's self-funding and self-touring. A collection of work that responds to David Eagleton, and that's, you know, a reasonably seamless response. Call and response in New Zealand. Call and response.
Robinson says this 8 metre by 3.5 metre piece is based on the poem Teleprompter by New Zealand Poet Laureate David Eagleton.
David Eagleton's work's always resonated with me because I also write and process myself in the world in a stream of consciousness Dada way, and so David's almost like a legitimate mirror to my amateur writing process.
We want data capture, information sickness, a face made of erectile tissue, a blizzard of little white lies.
Eagleton says the way Robinson has responded to the lengthy poem he penned in 1999 has completely blown him away, leaving the particularly loquacious writer almost lost for words. Almost.
Actually, I'm amazed almost. I'm really fascinated by what he's managed to do with my words, my text. In terms of his own work, he's added my words to and turned them into generating points for his own inspirations and his own obsessions and concerns.
David Eagleton and James Robinson have been taking inspiration from each other's work for many years, but Eagleton says this work is impressive.
So I was aware that he was capable of doing this, but it's blown me away just what he's managed to come up with this particular work, which is on another level again.
Robinson's work Teleprompter is a collection of canvas strips which have been painted and drawn on, burnt with a blowtorch, and then sewn back together to hang on the largest wall of his home studio on Grey Street in Port Chalmers. A full-length feature article is set to appear in the ODT's arts pages this Thursday. In Dunedin, the South Today.
The last of 5 little blue penguins taken into Kia and Oamaru were finally released this week. The birds were taken to the Oamaru Blue Penguin Colonies Rehabilitation Centre a month ago, having been found covered in oil.
Enjoying doing laps of the rehabilitation pool at Oamaru's Blue Penguin Colony. This little blue penguin is the last remaining one of 5 found covered in oil earlier last month. On arrival, each of the birds was cleaned for over half an hour using detergent and toothbrushes. The little blue penguins were then slowly introduced to the pool at the rehabilitation centre to induce the birds to begin preening again, with the colony's Science and Environmental Manager Dr. Philippa Agnew releasing this last one yesterday along the rocky shore. She says the Oamaru Blue Penguin Colony found oil in 2 places along the side of the harbour, and the oil has now been contained. Meanwhile, the growth of the penguin colony remains strong, and Sunday saw a record of 337 little blue penguins returning to the colony from their day feeding at sea. In Oamaru, the South Today.
After 7 long years, a memorial to those who conscientiously objected to war has been given the green light. The Archibald Baxter Memorial Trust has received over $300,000 from a lottery fund towards a sculpture in North Dunedin.
University of Otago Professor of Peace and Conflict Studies Kevin Clements has every reason to be happy now that the Lottery Environment and Heritage Fund has granted over $300,000 towards a memorial sculpture and garden at the intersection of George and Albany Streets. He says it'll be New Zealand's first memorial erected for conscientious objectors such as Archibald Baxter, who was born at Dunedin's Saddle Hill in 1881.
There are plenty of war memorials up and down the country, and there's no memorial whatsoever to honour those who chose a different path. And it took a lot of courage in the First World War in particular, and even in the Second World War, to conscientiously object to national conscription.
It's been a long 7 years to get this far, with the suggestion of having the memorial erected at Dunedin's Queen's Gardens opposed by the local RSA. The Archibald Baxter Memorial Trust has now been allocated this little space on City Council land to put their sculpture.
The Baxter Trust was set up about 7 years ago, and its aim is to develop this memorial garden, peace garden, to Archibald Baxter and all the conscientious objectors in New Zealand and throughout the world who've taken a very different approach to war than those who chose to take up arms. And it also funds an annual peace lecture and a peace education program in schools.
Baxter was in his mid-30s when he and 13 other conscientious objectors were shipped off to the World War I battlegrounds and subjected to various punishments, including Field Punishment No. 1, colloquially known as the crucifixion.
He was strung up on a pole in the middle of winter in France, within earshot of the front lines, and kept there for hours and hours on end. You were normally supposed, under Field Punishment No. 1, you were normally only supposed to take up to 8 hours a day, and he was there for up to 15. And it could have killed him.
The total cost of the sculpture is to be around $500,000, and this has now been raised thanks to various donations and the recent lottery grant.
There'll be a sculpture at one end which will be a representation of what's called Field Punishment No. 1, and it will be made out of Central Otago granite, and it will show the sort of shape of a man tied to a pole, and that will represent Baxter and all those who conscientiously objected to war in the First World War.
It's hoped work will begin on the memorial early next year and be completed by next December. In Dunedin, the South Today.
And that wraps up this edition of Southern News Week. For the latest news from the Southern region, head online to odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on Facebook and YouTube. Have a great evening. Ka kite anō.
supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.